Hi everyone, this is Shelby with Quest, and thank you for joining us for PeopleSoft Week. Our session today is Using Fluid to Replace Interaction Hub, presented by Bill Cage from ERPA, one of our PeopleSoft Week sponsors. I've got just a few housekeeping notes to go over before we get started. All attendee lines are in mute and will stay in mute throughout the presentation. So if you do have any questions, please put those in the questions drop-down box on your GoToWebinar panel, and we'll answer those at the end of the session. This session is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Quest website after we end today's call. So at this time, I'll pass things over to Bill to get things started.
Very good. Thank you, Shelby. Glad to have the opportunity to talk to everybody about the moving from the Interaction Hub, and you'll hear me often use the term portal. I know that they have changed the terms, as Oracle often does between what they call certain things. So if I use the term portal instead of Interaction Hub, those are one and the same. A little bit about me. I'm a executive vice president at ERPA, running our PeopleSoft practice. I've been doing this for a long time. PeopleSoft since '95, in IT since '91. So really have experienced a lot of change and been through with a lot of different organizations. Really excited to have a chance to talk to y'all today. Briefly about ERPA. Like me, been doing a lot of PeopleSoft for a long time. We basically position ourselves where we cover all the needs that any organization might need for supporting their ERP needs. I was going to say ERPA needs, but we have about 400 consultants, US-based consultants, plus an offshore capability. So as I go through the presentation today, I'm going to talk a little bit about Fluid. I don't know where everybody is on their journey to Fluid. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and then I'll talk about what it means to migrate from the Interaction Hub over to Fluid, and talk a little bit about what the levels of effort are and what the pros and cons are for doing that. So real quickly, a brief background on Fluid. Fluid, if you've been around PeopleSoft for a while, which I presume everybody has, it's the new interface. And where it got started was back in the day, PeopleSoft had a need to be able to present their application on mobile devices, so your cell phones and iPads and things like that. And so they, in 854, they released Fluid, and they released it in a way that it was parallel with the existing interface, which you'll hear referred to Classic or Classic Plus, which I'll talk about as we go through. And they're in parallel, so it didn't completely obviate Classic, although it is the direction that they're planning to go. The scope increased. Initially, it was about just being able to do mobile approvals and things like that were small device and mobility needs to it, and now it's expanded and it's changed, and it's excuse me, it's brought a lot of functionality to the system that just it was difficult to use previously. It addresses a number of concerns. Everybody was like, I want to use my phone to do fill in the blank, whatever that might be. People also have grown accustomed to smartphones and the way that apps work on smartphones and things like that. And so, particularly as new people are entering the workforce, that's their experience, and they expect that when they go to websites. They expect that when they use their phones to interact with other systems out there, and so there's become an expectation that why shouldn't PeopleSoft work similarly? So Oracle has embraced it, and Fluid is the way that that's the technology that they're using to adapt to it, and it's really brought a lot to it. Fluid's the future. They're definitely moving everything over to Fluid. And as you'll see there, there's a bullet with PeopleTools 858. Fluid is the default user interface. And there are ways. We've worked with some clients that wanted to go to 858, but they weren't ready to adopt Fluid. So there are ways. It's the default interface, but the Classic hasn't disappeared, so you can continue to use Classic if you need to. One thing that people noted was 858, you lost the breadcrumbs as a part of that. Well, 859, they brought that back. So if you need to hang on to Classic for a little bit longer, you still can. And then there's always going to be some pages that won't be converted to the Fluid interface. Those pages, for the most part, are the more complex pages that are going to be used on the PC monitor, and rather than, they're just not really appropriate to use on your phone. And what they've done for that is they have what they call Classic Plus, and Classic Plus is where they have changed the visual aspects of the page to make it look more fluid-like, so different color schemes, fonts, and that sort of thing, so that it gives a more of a seamless appearance between pages that are in Fluid and pages that may remain in Classic. So that's what that Classic Plus is. If you hear Classic and the term Classic Plus, that's the distinction. It's Classic Plus is really just a Classic page that has visual elements that makes it fit in more. If you haven't played with Fluid, what this is just a screen from a Fluid page, and this one happens to be Manager Self-Service out of the HCM demo database. So you'll see some various things on here that are very much representative of the Fluid interface. First and foremost is this tiles metaphor. You'll notice that each one of the areas, rather than having a menu structure, you have tiles that allow you to navigate. But tiles are more important than just navigation. And tucked over in the right corner where you see the 3-dot ellipsis, vertical ellipsis, if you click that, you can actually go into menu structures that you're accustomed to if you need to. But for the most part, these tiles are going to be your navigation point. And the benefit of the tiles, as you can see if you look at this, and again, this is from a demo database. So you'll notice, like in the lower right-hand corner of the approvals tile up at the upper left, that number 4 is a live number that represents that, you have 4 approvals that are pending for you. And so this ability to show live data on the tiles is really helpful if you're using this to manage your day-to-day activities. And if you look around, you can see some of the others have number values there that represent open work or tasks in progress and that sort of thing. Down the lower right, and I'll talk about it as well, you have the ability to use tiles to show analytics. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go forward. But again, that's live data against your database, and there are you have the ability, you or technically oriented people that can go through and build tiles that represent various things. So it's really a powerful interface. And then as you'll see on the left, it just popped up with, what does that look like on a in this case, a phone? And that's just a screenshot that I took off of my personal cell phone accessing the same page. So it's smart, so it knows if your landscape or your portrait, it knows how to size things and scale things appropriately depending on your device. So it works the same whether you're on a PC monitor or a tablet or a cell phone or any other device that you might use. It's more than just a pretty face. They've introduced a number of new functionality that really are targeted toward Fluid, but some of these things are definitely available in the Classic as well. So these are not Fluid only, but activity guides. We'll talk about each one of these real briefly as I step through the next few slides. But activity guides are really nice. It allows you to set up processes that are step by step, where you can go through and for example, changing benefits. I think that may be one of the examples. If you're doing if someone is getting married, for example, there's a certain number of tasks that need to be done. From an HR perspective, you can set up an activity guide that will walk somebody through each of those different steps that have to be done. Analytics, there's a lot there. We'll talk about some of that as we go. Those tiles I didn't mention, but it's mentioned here. Those tiles are drillable, so all you have to do is click on one of those tiles. For example, the one that showed the approvals, there were 4. If we had clicked on that, it would take us directly into where those approvals need to be managed. So each of those are drillable. The analytics themselves, that lower right-hand representation, that tile that you saw, if we wanted to drill into that data that was represented, we could have done that. Now, work centers, hopefully everybody's familiar with work centers at this point. If not, that was one of the big new features that came in with 9.2. Really improved and centralized a lot of the functionality for a processing area. We're not going to go into these. I'll touch on them, but certainly work centers. If you're not doing work centers, that's something that you really should take a look at. It's very valuable. And then dashboards kind of go hand in hand with the analytics, and then also they allow you to present information that is it can be real time, it can be also static. Just depends. But the benefit of dashboards and home pages and that sort of thing is that they can be personalized, so that each individual can set those up as appropriate, given the security model that has been put in place. So it's not just wide open. It's something that is managed by your administrators. Your PeopleSoft administrators can determine what level of customization that people can use to personalize dashboards and home pages and that sort of thing. This one is a quick slide that's an example of an activity guide, and you'll see in this case this is an onboarding activity guide, and you'll notice the list on the left hand side is a list of the activities that they need to follow through, and in the center it has the summary, and you can see through the various steps that they have to go through, and it tells them if they have done it, if they have started it, that sort of thing. But the point is that it allows you as administrators to be able to set up things that allow for people to be guided through a process, rather than doing that in a paper format or just as a sequence or a collection of distinct tasks that you throw out. This allows those sorts of things to be put together and provided out, so it helps people to go through. And again, on the pop-up that just came up, that's the same view on a view of an activity guide that's on a cell phone. Again, that was a screenshot off of my cell phone for a particular activity guide. You'll notice the little blue box that's there with the 2 white bars. Whenever you see that within Fluid, that means that's just a pullout, which is much more common if you're using on the small screen. So that menu, if you click that, it'll disappear, and you would see the individual pieces. From an analytics standpoint, you'll remember in the lower left here, I showed that that tile that was presented up front. And that's one that if, that's an example of it on the phone. If you were on a larger screen, you would see, analytics and the different types of graphs and analytics that you have available to you is very broad. There's a lot that you can do about, do with that. And I'll talk about Kibana and some other things that help, broaden that and give you a lot more power within the fluid environment. Um, um, the analytics are easy to build. These are things that can be created by, people who are reasonably savvy with a computer. I kind of liken it if you're reasonably capable with Excel or something like that, that level of complexity, then these are things that you can build out yourself within PeopleSoft now. And if you build them and security allows you, you could put those onto your dashboard or so that they show up as a tile that's down in the bottom. The data is live if you're doing the typical analytics using pivot grids and that sort of thing. And then Kibana is not quite live. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Work centers, again, I hope everybody's using work centers. It's something that is not unique. It's not unique to Fluid, but this is the Fluid representation of it. So it is something that that you'll hopefully be familiar with. The work centers really, each role that's out there, they've provided work centers for that, and it provides a central area to complete your tasks. So over on the left-hand side, you'll notice that there are a number of menu items over there, and these are configurable and then also can be personalized by individuals. And so things like reports and queries and external links and internal links for that matter, you can set that up so that when you come in this case, this is for billing. If you are a person that has that as a part of your job responsibilities, you can go straight to the billing work center, and everything you need to accomplish the tasks is all centralized there. So you don't have to go through and memorize the menu structure or navigation or know that work list items are over here versus over there and that sort of thing. It brings it all together. It's much more efficient. It's actually one of the big changes, as I mentioned in 9.2, that's that was really highly adopted. It's something that is a very powerful add. If you haven't adopted that, that's something you should consider. So this is talking more about the dashboards as well, but this snapshot is using a lot of the Kibana representations, and so it gives you a little bit of a sense about some of what's available. And I apologize if this is a bit of an eye chart. Some of it's very small, but I wanted to be able to just show some of the graphical representations that are available in Kibana. If you haven't started to adopt Kibana, Kibana is delivered as a part of PeopleSoft, so it's a part of your existing licenses, and it works hand in hand with Elasticsearch, which was the new search engine that came into the PeopleSoft environment. I want to say it was 8.5.5, but I may be wrong on the tools, but I think it was 8.5.5 tools. So everybody should be on Kibana now, or excuse me, on Elasticsearch now. And Kibana works hand in hand with Elasticsearch to allow you to do representations of data, and brings an enormous amount of power to that. And all of these can be represented as tiles within Fluid. And so these are examples. These are all being shown on a dashboard, but they could have just as easily been presented as a tile on a home page. similar to the analytics that we saw on the first page before. The one thing to note about Kibana is that because it lays on top of Elasticsearch, it's not truly real time against your data, which is a plus and a minus. The plus is that you're not going to impact performance of the data system, your transactional system, when you're running reports and analytics. But what it does mean is that you have to run the Elasticsearch jobs that build the indexes that Kibana sits on top. So it could be something that you run daily, or it depends on the nature of the data that's out there. But it could be daily, it could be weekly, it could be hourly, something like that to support these. But so that's something to keep in mind. Kibana brings a lot of power, allows you to do a lot more sophisticated analytics, and because it does sort of segment it out from the transactional database, you have less of an issue around performance and that sort of thing that you might run into. So that's something to keep in mind. And as you're thinking about Fluid, and as you start to think about using Fluid as your portal, these are capabilities that are there that maybe you're not thinking. I shouldn't say you're not. You should make sure that your thought process is broad, and you start to think about how do we do things better, and how do we do things differently to be able to meet the business needs much more efficiently. The tools that you have available from Fluid that that also spill over into how you do the portal or the interaction hub, it'll change, and these are the advantages that you're going to get. So something to think about. So as I mentioned, I was going to go briefly on Fluid, which I just completed, and then I'm going to talk about enabling the elimination of the portal. And again, I'll use those two terms, those two titles for that module interchangeably as we go forward. But the big thing, about the portal when it came into being was really about single sign-on, so SSO. And you'll notice in the diagram to the right, you'll see the key. The key to the portal is single sign-on. And what you see is that what that allowed a user to do is to be able to log into the portal, and then once they logged into the portal, then you could navigate to any of the PeopleSoft pillars that are out there. So if you had somebody that needed access to the general ledger and then also to payroll, once they signed into the portal, you could navigate into those pillars using single sign-on, so that they didn't have to sign on multiple times. The portal, because of the role that it performed, from a technical perspective, you would export a lot of the navigational items in the portal. You would also bring over a lot of the security from within each of the pillars would go over into the portal. And so, to get that benefit, you did have to also take on some level of effort to make sure that the portal met your needs. Now, in the kind of center lower part where it says external, that portal was it's a true portal, and it allows you to integrate content into your internal websites that are on the portal that are not just PeopleSoft. You could integrate into other web applications or websites and that sort of thing. So it's a very rich environment, and standards based. So there really weren't any limitations to what you could do with the portal. The last bullet there talks about content management capabilities as well. And so for people that are comfortable in that environment, you know what content management means, but just for the layperson, what that means is if your organization had used the portal, say to be the intranet, the main landing page for your internal intranet, and using it for corporate communications, for example, um, then that content management would allow those sorts of things to be updated. So you may have a block, you know, in the upper right, for example, that was about corporate announcements or something like that. And the content management is a simple way for people to manage the content that would be there. So maybe periodically, once a month, somebody would go in and you know, put in new information, or maybe daily there's certain things that they would change. So that's what that content management is all about. And if the portal is being used more as a general communication vehicle out to the organization, that's very powerful. And as we'll talk, that's something that is very different as you get into using, you know, using the fluid capabilities going in. Now, when PeopleSoft went to People Tools 856, what they did is that sort of portal capability, so that key that I was talking about, single sign-on, they actually added that functionality, that capability into each of the pillars. So now, you know, rather than, you know, having to have the portal to be able to do single sign-on, each one of the individual pillars actually can facilitate that single sign-on. And so what that, you know, what that means is that from a user perspective, and I apologize for the numbers of arrows. Hopefully, you know, hopefully it's making, you know, making the point. But the reality is that now you can get that single sign-on capability if you logged on first to FSCM, and then that, you know, that single sign-on functionality could allow you to navigate from FSCM to HCM and campus solutions and the like, without needing, you know, without needing the portal. And so what that did is it opened up that ability to say, you know, do I need that portal anymore? And so a lot of organizations start to ask that. And so the answer is that you don't have to have the portal to be able to utilize and make use of that single sign-on. And that's a, you know, that's a big deal. Now, I was talking about previously, if the portal is being used for things beyond just the single sign-on and some level of navigation, then you know, that's functionality that you have to think about, because the portal, you know, that's a unique aspect that is not contained in each of the pillars, that content management aspect that's there. So it's something to think about. But I didn't show it on this screen just because this is already a busy diagram. But each one of these also can interact with external web-facing applications. So you know, you could have links that go out to other, certainly other pillars within PeopleSoft, and then also out to external websites and web applications and that sort of thing. So that capability is there, but not specifically the content management. But again, like I said, it's not on the diagram, just to reduce some of that complexity. Now, using the portal, or using the one of the pillars as the portal, which is the same as saying using the fluid interface. Actually, it's not. This shows the difference between the classic versus the fluid. Now, as I talked about early on, the classic pages have not gone away. They're still there. Even if you have switched over to the fluid interface, the classic pages are there. Oracle has stated that they are moving. Their future direction is that everything is going to be fluid. And so they're working through the details of exactly, how that transition is going to work. And there's been discussion about, even at this point where they're starting with the release of Tools 858, they've talked about that the support for classic pages is being deprecated. So if a page has a fluid, uh, uh, I don't want to say replacement, but a fluid page that has addresses the same functionality, then Oracle is talking about that they're going to eliminate, as they go forward, the support for the classic page. So they're encouraging you to take the action, start to use the fluid page instead of the classic page, and that's part of what they do. It's anticipated. Oracle has not stated this, but it's anticipated that at some point in the future, uh, uh, the true classic pages will be eliminated. They're not taking them out now. They're leaving them in the system. You can use them, but they're not going to advance them. They're not going to provide support for them as they go forward. The focus will be on the fluid pages. But at some point, the thought is that they're going to go away, and it'll either be fluid or classic plus pages. And so once you flip over, that's what's going to be supported. Now, if you look, and I've talked about branding support, that has to do a little bit with the content management, but then also in that area where where you are going through and making that website look and feel in a very specific manner as it applies to your organization. If you've gone in, for example, today, and you're when somebody goes to that portal, it's really much more about a look and feel that is specific to your organization, and maybe doesn't have any look and feel for PeopleSoft. That term branding is sort of kind of a catch-all for that. In the classic pages, you still have that ability. So if you used one of the other pillars as your portal, so that people logged into it first to get access to all of PeopleSoft, if you were using the classic pages, which you can continue to do now, then you could get SSO and you could get branding support. If you go to the fluid interface, it's much more limited, and I'll bring that page back up on one of the next slides, and it's because of that tile metaphor. If you're going to fluid, it uses that tile metaphor. If you have designed a portal page today that's very much a different sort of user interface, then that's not going to be something that you can bring over completely if you're using the fluid interface as your portal. Mobile, as we've talked about, fluid is designed for mobile. So if you're using the fluid interface for your portal, then your portal travels on a cell phone, for example, and it's going to resize just like we've been discussing along. External integration works on either one. SSO, the single sign-on, we've talked about, that works on both, whether you're using one of the pillars. And again, just to make sure that that I'm anticipating the questions that are out there, that this is all about if you've gotten rid of portal, you said I don't want to use that, or Interaction Hub, and you're going to use one of the existing pillars as your portal. Once you make that decision to do that, then you then have the decision of whether you're going to use the classic interface or you're going to use the fluid. So that's what this is discussing. So reduce costs and complexity. I'll talk about that in a minute. If you go to fluid, it definitely reduces the cost and complexity. Getting rid of the portal itself definitely reduces costs and complexity, and I'll talk about that more in just a minute as well. Content management, we've talked about that several times. That is something that you can continue to make use of if you're using the classic. Fluid, not so much. There are some ways that you can create tiles that that maybe are communication vehicles, so that if you wanted to do have something like corporate communications, you could have a tile that could facilitate that sort of thing. But it's not the same as full-blown content management. So certainly Classic would have more advantages in that direction. And then, as I mentioned, Fluid is the future direction. If you're staying up with your POM updates and that sort of thing, you'll notice that they're continuously releasing Fluid pages. A lot of those pages are ultimately replacements for classic pages, but there are Fluid pages that are coming out that are Fluid only, and so there won't be a classic corresponding classic page that goes with that, and that's expected to get to become more and more as we go, to future releases. So some considerations as you're thinking about Fluid. If the portal using Fluid. If today your portal that you're using is primarily for that single sign-on access, and then maybe navigation to external web links or something like that, then the transition over to the Fluid, using Fluid as your portal is very low effort. It's something that that can be done without a lot of disruption, very little change in functionality, that sort of thing. Also, if your portal is primarily used to direct casual users, employees or students to their self-service applications, then the level of effort to replace the portal with Fluid it's very low. It's something that would not be a big exercise. You'd have to do a little bit of communication about the change, as you do with any sort of change, but the level of effort is not big. On the other end of the spectrum, you need to do some evaluation. If your organization has highly customized the portal today for very specific business considerations, and we run into clients that have built custom applications that are not PeopleSoft related at all, but are hosted within the portal environment. Those sorts of things. If you have that sort of thing, then you're going to have to evaluate that and see what the level of effort might be to do that if you went to the Fluid interface. Branding, we've already talked about that. If that branding, and as I defined branding before, it's really that look and feel of the portal itself. If that's of a high importance, that it that it mirror maybe the overall branding for the organization, then that's something that would have to be evaluated to see what that level of effort is. And then, as I've mentioned, if you're making extensive use of the content management, although there are some limited availability for that on the Fluid interface, for the most part, you're not going to have that ability. So the advantages of Fluid is, and I talked about from a cost and complexity. On the cost side, if you shut down the portal, you're gonna remove your license costs, so maintenance that you're paying on that pillar. Because it is a separate pillar, it has associated hardware costs and then internal support costs. I talked a little bit about the way that you do security when you have the interaction hub versus the way you'll do security going forward in each of the pillars. It simplifies that a good bit, and so your internal costs go down. Consistency of the interface, as you'll see, the portal looks and feels just like the other Fluid pages, and I'll show that on the slide in just a minute. It's mobile ready, so your portal, if somebody goes to that on their tablet or their cell phone, it's going to be exactly the same interface that they have, albeit adjusted for the format of the device. It's going to be the same as what they have if they're on their desktop. And then also it's supported. There's a lot of new things that are coming out through the PUMs and selective adoption. It is the future of what Oracle is moving forward with. What we have seen, Fluid in general, and this applies to the portal as well, a lot better adoption. Our experience with our clients has been the implementation of Fluid, and the implementation of Fluid as the portal has been really a non-event from a user training perspective and a user adoption perspective, because it feels more comfortable and it feels more like apps that people are using, and so it's something that that has really been a pleasure to put out because of the adoption. Support, very similar, this adoption theme when you go down, particularly for casual users. If you're using Fluid for student enrollment or something like that, what we've seen is that the users adopt it much more readily than they would otherwise, or similarly for employee or manager self-service. Those kind of users, the ability to go out and deploy that kind of thing, the support levels go way down from the classic models. And then don't forget that they can be personalized, so that when people are setting up their home pages, again within security that's defined by your systems administrators. Within that context, they can go through and personalize. They can add and remove tiles, put them in different orders, that sort of thing. Now, the note down at the bottom is from that previous slide where it showed the kind of pros and cons between Classic and Fluid. The reality is that if you're going to stay with the classic view of the portal itself, of the Interaction Hub, then you're probably best off staying with the Interaction Hub. So we can talk in more detail if people are curious about that. But if you're adopting Fluid and some of these attributes apply to you, then there are huge advantages to going down, that page. Now, this slide, if you look at it, looks very similar, if not identical, to the slide that we kind of started with. This is an example as well of a portal landing page or a home page using the Fluid interface as the home page to replace your portal. So in this case, this one is for this user. It's been identified that they're going to go and their home page is going to be manager self-service, and you can see up at the top that it indicates that, and that's also a drop down so that they can see the other major pages that are a part of the portal itself. And so once they go to this, they'll be prompted to log in. So all of their single sign-on will be taken care of going across. All the advantages of using the fluid interface as far as the tiles metaphor, the at-a-glance information that is real-time showing up on the tiles, as well as extending out to analytics and that sort of thing, as well as some of the minor, or I'll say lesser capabilities of content. Those things could be here as well. The different scenarios, and this is kind of what I've been talking about, is that if your organization has already deployed fluid, and you have those situations that I described before about that you're not heavily using the content management, or you're willing to adopt that fluid interface as your user interface from a portal standpoint, then your level of effort and your cost to deploy is relatively low. It's a low user impact. Your ROI is basically immediate. It's not a long-term project. And like I said, from an ROI standpoint, you immediately can reduce costs from hardware architecture, from licensing costs, and then a little bit harder to tease out is that support cost, but it's real. Now, if you haven't put in fluid yet, if you haven't adopted that, and the portal is largely used for single sign-on, then you really ought to, if you're considering getting rid of the portal, then you really should do it as a part of your transition to fluid. We've done a number of our clients that way. It has the benefit of not having to go through two different sort of user interface changes, and the incremental cost again of doing the replacement of the portal with fluid. The incremental cost is nominal. It's something that can be folded into a fluid project without a heavy lift of cost or effort. Now, the last scenario is where you really are making use of the Interaction Hub today, and you have custom applications and making heavy use of content management. Then that's where you really need to talk to somebody to understand what's been done, what's out there, and what are your options for migrating that over. It could be that some of that can readily be converted over in a standard way, but then all bets are off if they're custom applications and things like that about how you would adopt that. So that one's the one that's fairly questionable. The other two scenarios are really not a huge effort if you decide to go down that path. So a quick case study. This was a large community college system that we did out on the West Coast, and we went back and we just asked some questions about what were their thoughts, what did they actually see and gain. And the first one is, what were the benefits of dropping it? And some of what I just talked about with infrastructure and costs were echoed back. They truly realized that once they went down this path, they were able to simplify their infrastructure. It ended up, in like I was talking about, more from a hidden cost is that support level and your ability to eliminate and reduce support costs. That tended to play out. That was something that they echoed back. One thing that people should be aware of, most people are, but some people aren't, that when you go, for example, to do a PUM update and things like that, or a tools update, you have to apply that to every pillar that you have, and the portal itself is a pillar. And so, for example, on a tools update, if you had campus solutions and you had HCM plus the pillar, Well, if you eliminate the pillar, then that eliminates 1/3 of your level of effort to implement a tools release, for example. And those costs, those costs are a long time. They're baked in, and just that ability to eliminate that one pillar out can make a significant impact. And for this particular client, they estimated that their switch to using one of the pillars and Fluid as their new portal, it cut back on their upgrade and patching processes by about 40%. So that's not insignificant. And then again, because this was a school system, the question was about student behavior and how did they adopt to Fluid self-service. And as I've mentioned, and any of you that may have already gone through a switch to Fluid itself, you'll note that in all likelihood in your environment, Fluid was very readily adopted. It's something that has been well received, and particularly in the case of campus solutions, where students are users, but in a very real perspective, they're customers, and so it's kind of the customer experience has been very well adopted. People, have universally lauded that, and it's something that has paid big dividends. Now, on the more corporate side, for the most part, self-service and that sort of thing is really employee and manager self-service. So they're not, they're your internal customers, not necessarily paying customers. But the reaction is very much the same. I know there's a big healthcare system that that we helped take them to Fluid as a part of an upgrade for their HCM, and the feedback and the response is overwhelmingly positive. So those are several of the goals that you hope to get out of something like this that have proven for us with our clients, have proven to be true. So that's what I had to present about the migration of Fluid. Now I know that there are a lot of aspects that you may have that are very specific to your environment. If you have questions, you can feel free to ask those in the questions block on the GoToWebinar control panel, or my contact information is presented. I'll give it again here in just a second. You can reach out and ask questions of me directly if you would like. This is a slide about Quest. Quest, all of you are, well, I think there were non-Quest members that are invited to these events, and so not all of you are Quest members, but I know that membership in Quest is something that, having been a PeopleSoft customer as well as a member of the consulting partner side of PeopleSoft, Quest has proven to be very valuable to us. So again, my name is Bill Cage. There's my phone number if you need to reach me. I think on the first slide I had my email address. I think that these slides are going to be made public. So if you do have questions in the future, feel free to reach out. We'll certainly do our best to answer your questions. Are there any questions that anyone would like to make at this point? If so, just type those into the question block and we'll be happy to take those. Otherwise, if you don't have questions, I appreciate your time today. I hope that you're getting a lot of value out of PeopleSoft Week. I know this is a new twist on some of the things that Quest has been doing, and hopefully it proves to be valuable for you.
Great. Thank you so much, Bill. And we have had a couple questions come in so far, so I can start with those. One said, should approvals, the approval title, share approvals between HCM and FSCM in this model?
Typically, no. Toward the late stage, I showed some of the home pages, um, and they can go across. And what you could do though is you could share different tiles. And when I first heard the question in my mind, it was like, would that single tile show all approvals from all different areas? Uh, I don't think that that's something that you would want to do. I don't think that I don't think that I have run into that. What you would have are different tiles for the different approvals. So if you had an AP approval, for example, or maybe a personal action approval, those would be separate tiles. They could be on the same page though.
Great, thank you. We did have another question. Can homepage tiles be linked from different databases?
Yes. So if you think about the architecture of PeopleSoft, the pillars, when we use that term, each of those pillars are separate databases. And so yes, they can definitely go across. And we talked about as well is that those tiles are not limited to just PeopleSoft either. So if you're in theory, if you were to add, I don't know why you would, but a Gmail tile, which you could, it could be a link to Gmail, that could be on a single page, but accessing, Google's databases. So you're not even limited to just PeopleSoft.
Great, thank you. We did have another question come in. We've also noted that when you give a user approval to Fluid, like work centers, it then forces them into other Fluid modules, for example, approvals, and then kicks them into Fluid approvals even if they don't want that. Is that a tools issue?
Uh, Not a tools issue, it's a security issue. Um, so it's how you structure your security. And I mentioned about that um, Oracle has not implemented it at this point where they're forcing you to go to use classic pages or fluid pages. But with 858, they did make fluid the default. And so if you haven't gone in and looked at that, then I think, at least what I'm hearing, it sounds like what's happening is that uh, when you go into something, one page, because of security, when you're going to another page, you're going to the default, which is fluid. That's something that can be managed through security.
Great,
But I would
thank you.
encourage to take the plunge and go full fluid. I think, resistance is futile at some point. And it's a much better experience, but certainly while you're still on that fence, you have to manage it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Bill, for answering those questions. That is all that we've had come in. So thanks again, Bill, for presenting, and to ERPA for sponsoring this week's event. And thank you to everyone who joined this session today. We do have a couple more sessions taking place today and throughout the rest of this week, so be sure to go to the PeopleSoft Week webpage to register for those. Just a reminder to everyone that this session was recorded, so we will get it uploaded to the website shortly after today's sessions. But thanks again, Bill, and everyone have a great day.
Thank you.